So, my name's Erica, and I am going to tell you a little bit about my life history paper and the person that I interviewed. The person that I interviewed, he was 69 years old. He was born on December 12th, 1950. He was born in Kearney County, Kansas, and he still lives in Kearney County. He was the 10th child born out of 12 total children. He had 8 brothers and 4 sisters. So, stage 1, infancy. Um, His mom was a stay-at-home mom. He, um, his mom was the primary caretaker. She was the one who nurtured and provided for them. Um, he was bottle fed and well nurtured. His dad worked most of the time, so his dad was away from home a lot. Um, he doesn't remember much about the stage of birth much, but he said that there was no known story of crisis during that stage. Um, the stage trust versus mistrust. I was led to believe he was in the trust part of the stage due to the fact that there were no signs or anything that stood out to be different that would lead me to believe there was mistrust going on. Stage 2, toddlerhood. He experienced moving from the city to the farm. That was a pretty big hurdle for him. His dad had to learn how to, work on the farm and transition from his original job. Um, at this time, 3 of his sisters, along with his mom, helped take care of him. He noted that all siblings were treated the same and everyone was equal. There were no favorites or no, you know, special treatment to any of the other siblings. Um, during this stage for him, he got to experience some of his older siblings getting married and was a part of that. Um, he stated that there were no troubles with potty training or anything like that. He was a pretty easy child to take care of. There was also no major story of crisis in this stage, and the stage autonomy versus shame and doubt. I chose autonomy because he seemed to be very in control of himself, and there were no warnings or signs that led me to believe he was in shame or doubt. Stage 3, early school age. At this time, he and his family moved back to town from the farm. He mentioned that the farm life was difficult and it was hard to make a living. Um, he began attending school at Lakin grade school. At this time, 6 out of his 12 siblings still lived at home, so he still was not the only child. He mentioned that he had his normal brother-sister fights and arguments like any siblings would have. He never had any problems in school. He said that he never had any learning disabilities or anything like that. He was pretty well on track and did well in school. Um, transportation to school, he said that there were times that he had to walk to school, but majority of the time they rode the bus to school. Also, at this time, there were no known stories of crisis. In the stage of initiative versus guilt, I was led to believe he was in the initiative part of the stage due to he seemed to be very independent and capable of doing things on his own and being himself. Stage 4, middle childhood. He stated that in 1957, a massive blizzard hit Lakin and caused some not serious problems, but caused some little hurdles, I guess, for them. There was a lot of snow, so transportation was very limited, and resources were kind of thin at this time. In 1958, he moved to California. He mentioned that his parents, well, his dad mainly, had to look for another job and to help support the family to make a living. He said that it was very difficult living in California as they didn't really know much about living in California. He learned trapper skills, like learning how to trap wildlife or game. Him and his brothers had to hunt. They also had to learn how to cut and haul firewood as they had no electricity. So firewood was their source of heat and light. He mentioned that his mother stayed home, which, again, she was the primary caretaker of the children and the stay-at-home mom. His dad worked to financially support the family. He said that he was able to make friends easily. He had no problems making friendships or being in school with others. He got along with his peers and his teachers. He said that there were no hardships. He didn't mention any. The stage of industry versus inferiority, I was led to the industry part as he, again, was very independent, very reliable. He was easygoing, not really a problem child, and he was able to take on the role of doing things on his own. Stage 5, early adolescence. They had moved back to Lakin from California. At this time, he was graduating from the 8th grade. He mentioned that 9th grade was the highest level of education that he had received. He remembers the Vietnam War taking place during this time. He mentioned that 6 out of his 8 brothers had been chosen for war, so they were drafted to go fight in Vietnam. Again, he said he was easy to get along with. He had no problems interacting with others or his peers in school. He stated that he was not home much, as he referred to himself as a wild child. He would rather be out with his friends and his buddies than be at home with his other siblings and his mom. During this stage, he mentioned that he started his first official job when he was 13 years old. At 17 years old, he started dating and driving. He was out on his own a lot. And in the stage of identity versus role confusion, I was led to choose identity, as he seemed to be very outgoing, and he knew what he was doing, and he had his group of friends and the things that he chose. Stage 6, young adulthood. He was first married at 18 years old, and currently he will be married for 50 years this coming year in December. He experienced hardships of making a living. He started driving truck, hauling cows and grain and other things to help financially. During this time, he experienced the birth of his 3 children. He was 21 when his first child was born, and then 23 the second child, and 25 when his third child was born. He mentioned that one of the things that was hard for him was he had to take care of his mother. His mother had become sick. She was getting older, and so he helped out taking care of his mother. In 1981, he mentioned that his mother had died in a car wreck. She didn't make it. He didn't specify how the car wreck happened or, what the extent was. Um, then a year later, he told me that his father had died of old age. He was, he just gotten old and his body just kind of quit on him. In the stage of intimacy or isolation, I chose intimacy because he is very confident in his relationships and very proud of his relationships, and he doesn't struggle with finding the motivation to, mingle with others or meet others. He's a very people-centered person. Stage 7, maturity. One of his biggest accomplishments he mentioned to me was he had bought his own semi. During this age frame for him, he had mentioned that he had lost 7 of his siblings due to death. They all had passed away. He did mention a major crisis that struck out to him the most was he had been separated from his wife for 14 days. He did not specify or give any reason as to how or why that happened. Now he takes care of his wife. He is the main support of his family. He works and brings in the money to support financially. Family is very important to him. He's a very family man, and he's all for being around his family. He didn't mention any major hardships. He stated that his family made the best of what they had, and they stuck together, and they did with what they had. In the stage of generativity versus stagnation, I chose generativity because he's very wise for his age. He knows what he's doing. He has learned from his mistakes. He pushes forward, and he never gives up in life. Stage age, old age. So currently he still drives a truck to make a living. Now the roles have kind of switched. His wife takes care of him, or helps take care of him. He noted that they moved their daughter in with him to help care for his wife while he was on the truck. He is gone over the road for several days at a time, so his daughter moved in to help take care of his wife while he was gone. He currently has worked for his current job for 11 years. He mentioned that he had 8 grandkids and 9 great-grandchildren. He loves life and he loves his family. He didn't state any major story of crisis. He again mentioned that they did with what they could, and they made do with what they had. And in the stage of ego integrity versus despair, I chose ego integrity. Again, he's very wise. He's, led to believe that he can accomplish anything he sets his mind to. He is a very well-respected man and has respect for a lot of people. And he just in general has a positive outlook on life and on the things that he does. Relating to the theories, I chose Bandura's social learning theory as he observed his siblings and others around him. He had to, learn to do the things he did from watching others, and he looked up to his siblings and his father. So I thought that this theory fit well for him. The other one was Bandura's self-efficacy theory. He was very confident in the things and events that he did. He was very successful in friendships and in school. He never gave up. He never quit. He kept going and he learned from his mistakes. My evaluation and conclusion of this person's life: he comes from a well-stable home and family environment. He's a very well-respected man. He's a very loving and caring person. He focuses on the positives rather than the negatives. From his stories, he lived a pretty normal life as normal gets. All of his personal needs were met. Nothing out of the ordinary stood out to me. Ramifications: just being able to understand how children differ from others and understanding that everyone is unique in their own way. Knowing what the personal needs are of a child, the hierarchy of needs. The chart was created to ensure what those needs are and where a child may be lacking. Understanding where children fall into each stage, knowing, where they are developmentally and how they are progressing or if they are needing help. Knowing signs or signals that stand out. I put that because I feel it's important to know what a child is meaning. A child could be sending out a signal or acting out in a way and trying to let someone know that they're lacking something and they're not really being paid attention to. I put knowing what is important to an individual. I think understanding one's story and knowing what they value and how they differ from others makes that person unique. I think especially as a social worker, knowing these topics is very important. Some meaningful aspects that I took from my person's story. He came from a loving, caring family. They always stuck together. He kept pushing forward with life no matter what was handed to him. I put his outlook on life is astonishing. Obviously, he comes from a different generation than I do, so he has the traditional, old-fashioned ways of living. He still believes that those are true, and he sticks to them very strictly. He lives life with a purpose, and he, is there for others, and others can rely on him. And to me, that's important. That's how life should be. So in conclusion, the 8 stages of Erikson gives a mental image of how children are lacking developmentally. They give a better idea as to why children act or behave the way they do. They give an importance of being able to see the bigger picture, to think outside the box. Also to keep an open mind, to see things from others' perspectives, and to, see things from a different angle. Knowing what some of the underlying factors are. Lack of personal needs. Children, even adolescents, can be lacking a need and acting out for attention to get someone to understand them. And lastly, to get a better understanding of children, Erikson designed these stages to help social workers, therapists, and so on to have an idea of how children are behaving and where they are developmentally, to just understand them better.